आज पंजाबी भाषा को ये हमारा सौभाग्य है सर। मुझे खत्म करने दीजिए सर। एक
क्वेश्चन 121, क्वेश्चन और 121 श्रीमती बन्ना जी। माननीय मंत्री जी क्वेश्चन 121
एक प्रति सवा पटल पर रख दिया गया।
And I would like to request you and the indulgence of the House in terms of enunciating our plan to address this issue. Certainly the steel sector is known as a hard-to-abate sector. However, we are not very far in terms of global averages, in terms of our emission numbers, as opposed to what the Honourable Member said. Our current average emission intensity is about 2.55 tons per CO2 per ton of crude steel, compared to about 1.95, which is the average in the world. However, we still have a way to go, and therefore we have put in place a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and a long-term plan. The short-term plan really looks at reduction of carbon emissions through energy and resource efficiency, renewable energy. The medium-term plan, which is 2030 to 2047, looks at CCUS, which is carbon capture, utilization, and storage, as well as usage of possibly green hydrogen, depending on technology innovations. And the long-term plan from 2047 to 2070 looks at a complete move over from ore-based and coal-based to much more technological innovations to come down to net zero as far as the world is concerned. I'd like to just inform the honourable member as well, if you look at this industry, you have to have in place supply-side drivers as well as demand-side drivers to bring down the level of emissions. As far as supply-side drivers are concerned, we've looked at energy efficiency and we've actually achieved a lot. From 2005 to 2022, we have brought down emissions by almost 15%, and our target is to cut it by another 10% by 2030. Because of the steps in this sector, the specific energy consumption has come down from 7 to 6.3 gigacalories per ton of crude steel produced. And the emission intensity also has come down from 3 to 2.55 in terms of the tons of CO2 compared to the total crude steel that is produced. We are also looking at renewable energy as a source, where we've looked at the National Solar Mission, where we hope to cut emissions by 20% by 2030. Resource efficiency is another area. Here we intend to use pellets, we intend to use scrap, we intend to use plastic as a raw material. All these three areas can bring about lowering of emissions. In fact, scrap can lower emissions by almost 85%. So that's another area that we are looking at tremendously. Today, India consumes 26 million tons of scrap. We import 4 million tons, so total 30 million tons of scrap are being used in India today to manufacture steel as we speak, which is roughly about 22.5% of our production. We're also looking at the possibility of green hydrogen when it becomes economically efficient to do so. Today, the prices are way above, as well as carbon capture and storage. On the demand side as well, sir, we are looking at two aspects. One is possibly government mandation of usage of green steel, because almost about 20% of our steel is used in government projects, and whether we can look at government mandation for a small amount of steel production. If we look at roughly 20% of a mandatory limit, I'm giving you an example, at a 30% price premium for green steel, the cost of projects will increase only by 1.26%. So this is an avenue that we're looking at. And finally, raising private demand, raising our awareness as a population, looking at branding green steel inside, eco-labeling, as well as looking at mandating the private sector and ESG rating benefits.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Second supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The Minister has very articulately put down what exactly the government is doing in that direction, and it's certainly very, very welcome. Sir, I would like to know whether the government also considers to have certain green guidelines for every plant in this behalf. Carbon capture you have already mentioned, but specific use of plastic waste to reduce the coal requirement, using solid waste which is generated as waste at the plants in roads and railway lines, like it's done in many foreign countries, recycling of water and the like, for an environmentally sustainable way of production that can be differentiated, sir, from other coals, so that the government and public sector can use it with a specific mandate till it comes into 100% the supply chain.
Thank you,
or
Vandana ji.
demand chain.
Thank you.
So again, a very good suggestion for action by the honourable member. And let me say this, that it's not easy to mandate a universal formula, if you will, in terms of what is the input material that every plant you should use, because every plant has its own makeup. So for example, you have some plants based on electric arc furnace, you have other plants that are based on blast furnace or BOF, some that use DRI process with pulverized coal injection. So every plant has its own system. But certainly, as a category, we are looking at raw materials in terms of resource efficiency, and let me just give you a few examples. For example, if we look at the area of pellets and we use 100% pellets, you can almost reduce your CO2 emissions by 10 to 15%. That's example number one. Number two, if you look at scrap, as I mentioned, you can lower CO2 emissions by 85%, and as I mentioned to you, we are using 30 million tons of scrap today in India as we speak. We're one of the countries that are on the forefront of using so much scrap compared to the rest of the world. The third area is plastic, but that can be used as a mixture in terms of the process as opposed to the input. And the fourth, which is very important, is beneficiation of iron ore. If you beneficiate iron ore, if you have a 1% increase in Fe content, you can lower the coke requirement by almost about 1%. And if you lower coke requirement, then you lower CO2 emission as well.
Thank you. Shri Anil Agrawal ji.
क्या माननीय इस्पात मंत्री जी यह बताने की कृपा करेंगे कि भारत में स्टील प्लांट से होने वाले टोटल एयर पोल्यूशन का कितना परसेंटेज स्टील प्लांट से है और इस एयर पोल्यूशन को कम करने के लिए।
धन्यवाद। एक क्वेश्चन हो गया। माननीय मंत्री जी प्लीज बी ब्रीफ काइंडली, क्योंकि और क्वेश्चंस हैं।
अध्यक्ष महोदय, मेरे पास टोटल एयर पोल्यूशन की क्वांटिफिकेशन नहीं है, पर पर्यावरण मंत्रालय UNFCC को, यूनाइटेड नेशंस फ्रेमवर्क ऑन कन्वेंशन ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज, हर 2 या 3 साल अपने आंकड़े सबमिट करते हैं। और जहां तक स्टील का विषय है, जो करीब 95 मिलियन टन CO2 का प्रोडक्शन था 2010 में, 2014 में 154 मिलियन टन तक गया और 2016 में ये 135 मिलियन टन तक गिरा है।
थैंक यू। ऑनरेबल P. Wilson.
Honorable Minister, this question may be a little bit different. To tell me what is the status of the Salem steel plant as the complete disinvestment has been taken place, and can you tell whether the valuation has been done and whether the job security of the existing employees has been taken care? Thank you.
Yes, this question not related to Air India.
But sir, I will try and answer the honourable member because I know it's of interest to him. Yes, I will certainly try and do that.
Please.
SSP is certainly slated for disinvestment. DPM of the Finance Ministry and my ministry are both, the Steel Ministry are working together on this. We have tried to take our investors to do due diligence and visit the plant, but unfortunately, I regret to inform the House that the state government has not been able to create that security environment for the due diligence by investors to take place. However, we have said that the financial bids and the bids should be submitted. I believe, don't hold me to this, but I think sometime in January. If I stand to be corrected, I will revert you.
Not, Honorable Sri Ajodhya Rami Reddy, nothing. Manya Ajodhya Rami Reddy.
Sir, EU has recently released the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which directs that goods imported from a high polluting country will face a levy at the border based on its emission footprints. With the India exporting 20-25%,
please be brief.
With India exporting 25% of their steel production to the EU, how will this impact our steel industry, and what steps the government is taking to address this issue? Thank you.
Sir, as far as environment concerned, this is an issue that affects the steel industry worldwide. I am also pleased to report to the House through you, sir, that India has now reached a new record. We have become the second largest steel producer in the world in the last 8 years, doubling our capacity from 150 million to 154 million tons worth of production. We are very, very aware of the environmental concerns across the board. This affects producers all across the world, and which is why I have enunciated in this House a very clear articulation of both the supply side and the demand side plans that we have in place to reduce CO2 emissions in the steel sector, because without a doubt, this is the way the world is going, and steel has to conform to that path of environmental protection.
Thank you. Question number 122, माननीय संजीव अरोरा जी, माननीय मंत्री जी, माननीय मंत्री जी,
उत्तर सभा पटेल पर रखा।
फर्स्ट सप्लीमेंट्री, माननीय संजीव जी।
सर माइक।
फर्स्ट सप्लीमेंट्री, पहला सवाल।
Honorable Chairman, sir, I would like to ask Honorable Minister through you that how come Amritsar and Chandigarh airports were not pushed while signing agreements when everyone knows that maximum Indian population is from Punjab, especially in Canada, and the agreement was with Canadian.
Thank you.
Sir, I would like to respond to the honourable member who's asked the question, as well as the honourable member who raised this issue in 0R, Raghav Chadda ji. Let me be very clear, sir, that India has to look after her own interests. And the fact of the matter is that in the past governments, we have been way too liberal in terms of signing our air service agreements and giving multiple points of call to our neighbors very close to our geography. Whereas if you look at the situation today, sir, especially as far as Amritsar and Chandigarh are concerned, the honourable member in 0R also had raised, it's absolutely untrue, the statement that he has made. I'd like to place that in front of the House, that there is no connectivity in Amritsar, Chandigarh. I would like to inform him as well as the House that today we have connectivity, international connectivity from Amritsar and Chandigarh to almost 7 countries: United Kingdom, Qatar, Dubai, Malaysia, Sharjah, Singapore and Italy. As far as Amritsar is concerned, we have 17 air traffic movements per week internationally, specifically to Singapore, Doha and Kuala Lumpur, as well as to Tbilisi and to Malposa, Milano. As far as our domestic carriers are concerned, we have 42 air traffic movements internationally in Amritsar and Chandigarh together. 33 in Amritsar, 9 in Chandigarh, connected to London, Birmingham, Dubai, Sharjah, Rome and even Bergamo. So this is the length and breadth of wide connectivity. Certainly in our air service agreements, we only give connectivity to 6 metros in India, because in response we hardly get 1 or 2 points of call in those countries. So certainly we cannot open up our country to them. We must also strengthen our Indian carriers, the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and I'm very pleased to report to this House that now our Indian carriers are getting wide-bodied aircraft. We are going to go long haul. We are going to put our Indian flag across the world in terms of direct connectivity. And I have great confidence in our Indian carriers to be able to provide that service, and certainly Punjab will be a very key element of that.
Thank you.